Hey, it's Monty and Khalees from the Fabulous 413, and you're listening to us on the internet probably right now because this is a podcast. So, hey, maybe think about going to nepm.org and making a contribution to keep the Fabulous 413 in your podcast feed and also on the radio.
Because, hey, it's the membership drive.
Become a member.
Because every little bit really does help, whether it's $5 a month, $10 a month, or more if you have the ability to give more. It helps keep all of the programs that we create on air and online, frankly.
Maybe you just heard our recent conversation with Brian Henson from the Jim Henson Company.
Or with Latif Nasser of Radiolab and folks from the IAU about naming a moon.
Yeah.
Well, a quasi-moon.
A quasi-moon.
Still counts.
Right. Those are the kind of conversations we love to have. We like to focus on the 4 counties of Western Mass, but you could be listening to us from anywhere. Maybe you love these conversations and want to help keep them on your pod.
And honestly, we love sharing them with you, and we love hearing how you interact with them. Like the folks who drove to go to the Lake Pleasant celebration, or the folks who contacted us to find good places to go in the Berkshires. Honestly, we're still working on that one too. There's so many things to explore in the Berkshires, it's so cool.
And we want to explore them all, and we can't do it without your help. So, if you can, think about becoming a member and supporting what we're doing here on the Fabulous 413 by going to nepm.org right now. Or maybe yell at your phone and they'll do it for you.
Yeah.
Hey, Siri, go to NEPM. Will she do that?
I mean, she probably will. You can yell at Cortana too, and then she'll do it, but I'd rather not.
Is that like a coffee with milk in it?
No, that's cortado.
Ah.
I love those. They're the best.
I do too, actually.
Yeah. And there's a lot of things that we can give you for those contributions. If you head over to nepm.org, you can see the full selection of things that you might get for becoming a new or sustaining member this week. Thanks so much for your support, and on with the show.
NEPM's podcasts are funded by Armbrook Village, offering research-based arts, music, fitness, and lifelong learning programs at their assisted living and Alzheimer's care community in Westfield. armbrookvillage.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, offering solar options, energy security, and solutions for the local community. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I am Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, we'll sink our teeth into the fantastically complex linguistics at the core of a new novel by East Hampton's Jedediah Barry. The naming song comes out tomorrow, and we'll talk with the author about his new book and how it fits with his other works.
And Mr. Universe Salman Hameed of Hampshire College and Kainaat Studios is super excited about cosmic excretions.
That sounds like something I should make a joke about.
Well, this particular one is about 23 times the length of our galaxy, so good luck with that.
Well, it's actually 140 times the length of our galaxy and 23 million light years long.
Oh, see? Even more, stupendous for the brain.
And in Williamstown, a small art house theater is already feeling November's civic push. We are in the brandish new lounge of Images Cinema in Williamstown with Dan Hudson, Executive Director of Images Cinema. Hello.
Howdy. Thanks for coming by.
We had you on while we were in Springfield, and you were here a year ago to talk about your Indigenous Film Festival last year. But you've got something happening here at Images that ties in nicely, I think, to the election coming up very shortly. But for those who aren't familiar with Images Cinema, tell us a little bit about the history and the current incarnation of Images Cinema.
Images Cinema is over 100 years old. It was originally opened up as a silent movie theater that was seated 400. And in the 1980s, it was cut in half, and one half of where what was formerly the theater is where the Crust Pizza restaurant is now. And in the late 90s, we incorporated as a not-for-profit. So this past year, we celebrated our 25th anniversary as a 501c3 nonprofit.
We've talked many times to the Triplex in Great Barrington, which is a newish nonprofit that's revived that theater. The Amherst Cinema is something that, has only popped up in the last 15, 20 years. But to have done it in the 90s, was there a lot of cinemas or movie theaters that were trying this model out in that era?
Yeah. I mean, there were some. We were kind of in a sort of cohort of a lot of smaller community theaters were transitioning in the 90s, early 2000s. There were some other theaters that had done that before us, such as the Coolidge Corner Theater in Brookline.
Oh, yeah. Go there when I was a kid. I didn't know that was a nonprofit.
Yeah, so there's definitely...
That's where I saw the Mystery Science Theater movie.
You hit something. You killed the hobble.
Lots of different disruptions in the industry that have knocked out some different theaters. Some theaters in our area closed in the past few years. There used to be a theater at the mall in Lanesboro, also a theater in North Adams that have closed just in the past few years. Those had for-profit business models, so the nonprofit business model is something that does really help small theaters in rural areas be able to continue.
Honestly, it seems like arts organizations writ large, because just the shift in the way that people are attending arts programming has changed too. So nonprofit, we're seeing this in film and in music, seems to be a way forward to try and create a new ecosystem for arts engagement. You just happen to do it way earlier than everybody else.
It makes you eligible for grants and, tax-free contributions that you wouldn't make if you're just selling tickets and popcorn to try to survive.
It's just pretty typical for a lot of arts organizations. We have a lot of what we call earned income, selling concessions, selling tickets, and that sort of thing. But that only makes up maybe 70% of our annual kind of like operating revenue. So that other 30% is coming from donations, grant, memberships, that sort of thing. Yeah.
And even the ticket sales for the films oftentimes are going. I mean, you're an independent theater, so you're not doing the big Hollywood Marvel movies and stuff, but a lot of that gets kicked back to the filmmakers, right?
Yeah, I mean, anywhere from like 35% to up to 65% of the ticket revenue goes directly back to the filmmakers or the studios.
Images Cinema in Williamstown, a nice place to see some of the littler movies. And we're speaking with the executive director, Dan Hudson, in this new little lobby area. Tell us about this expansion that's just a couple months old.
Yeah, so I've been the executive director here about 2 years now. And when I was first coming out and meeting the staff and board of the organization and considering the position, that was actually one of the very first ideas. They're like, hey, we've been thinking about, having this sort of what we call the lounge, but at the time we're like, is it a cafe? Is it a bar? But, it's actually ended up kind of being this really beautiful, flexible kind of multi-purpose room almost. Like we have behind this beautiful image over here that lifts up and reveals a screen. We have a screen and projector here and 7.1 surround sound, so we can show movies in here. We have this beautiful bar which can like pull in and out. So on Fridays and Saturday nights, we make cocktails in here, all local products as much as possible. It's just a great opportunity for us to work with some different artisans here in the community.
If election season has got you down, one thing you could potentially do is disengage your mind from the actual ins and outs of what's going on in the news cycle and think of the broader picture of civics. And civics is something that Images Cinema is bringing to the screen.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of discussion in recent years with the rise of sort of autocracy and around the globe and democracy. What does it mean? How do we keep it going? Especially in a country like America, which has such a mix of different faiths, nationalities, ethnicities, all sorts of different things that some other countries that are kind of much more homogenized. How does democracy work as people have so much deeply held views, and social media and other internet echo chambers are making people more polarized, even beyond just this specific election season? But that's definitely sort of in the backdrop of like these things being front and center for us right now. But these are ongoing issues that a lot of things have felt sort of tenuous for years now. And so how do we examine what are some of these underlying issues that we can do better to actually have a kind of more engaged population and a more kind of ways in which to kind of like address some of these underlying issues which are making people more divisive and polarized.
And film is a great way to do that. So what are some of the films that are part of this Civics and Cinema series that you've got here at Images?
Yeah, so we have 3 films on a series of 3 Mondays. September 23rd, we have a film called Bad Faith, which is looking at the marriage of far-right extreme politics and certain religious movements as well, that we now kind of are terming more Christian nationalism movement, folks that are trying to drive the Project 2025 type agenda that we're hearing a lot about this election season.
Christian nationalism has been a political tool for centuries.
It has nothing to do with Christianity. It's about power and politics.
The goal was to enshrine Christian identity as the law of the land.
To reclaim the United States for God.
You can't take over society unless you take over the 7 pillars, and they've gone one by one to do it.
We want total war.
We are the Christian Taliban. We need to force the people to believe what we believe.
When government is in the hands of godly men, it is good. But in the hands of all others, it is evil.
We're partnering with a lot of local faith leaders here in the area to kind of have an interfaith dialogue, folks of different religions or different Christian denominations, and their vantage point on how do we get to this moment, and like people of faith that don't have those sort of political ambitions to try to make a theocracy or what have you. How do you have conversations with your family members or your friends and neighbors that might hold some of those belief systems and those values, and how can we kind of bridge those divides and maybe heal some of those divisions. We also have a film called Join or Die on September 30th, which actually looks a bit at one thesis as to the underlying divisions and polarization that we're experiencing right now, is that outside of churches, what are other spaces and means of which that people have met people of different backgrounds and be able to build relationships with people that might not be immediately in your bubble or share all your same values and worldview. And it kind of looks at it through the lens of the work of Robert Putnam, who made a very famous book a number of years ago called Bowling Alone.
The book Bowling Alone, which you're familiar with, by Robert Putnam.
The activity may still be going on, but there's no social capital being built.
That decreases the trust we have in one another.
How lonely Americans are, how divided.
You know, he may have been onto something.
We have to see loneliness as a threat to our health security and to our overall national security.
We are trying something that hasn't been done before, which is growing and sustaining a multiracial democracy.
Politics and policy ultimately depends on the social health of our country.
Looking at loneliness as like something that's really increasing, the feeling of loneliness in America, and looking at the death of things like the Elks Lodge or Rotary clubs or bowling leagues, or things that aren't religious, aren't your workplace, but that were other ways in which that people in a community met people of different socioeconomic statuses and all sorts of different things that you might not normally immediately gravitate towards those people as like your best friends or your family members or something like that. But there were ways in which that people were more involved in their community outside of church and work. And so what are those types of things that people can do to get out the door and get involved, get off the couch, get off their apps on their phone, and get out in the world and build community with other people. And finally in the series we have on October 7th a film called Girls State. And this is kind of just like a feel-good movie too.
It is good to escape a little bit. That's what movies are there for, to make you think and escape.
You hear that, Lars von Trier?
Yeah.
There's no violin. The choir is so quiet and no one takes a spin.
Making us work too hard with those.
So it follows a group of girls in the state of Missouri that are going through this program. It's a national program that's put on by the American Legion. There's Boys State, was a film a couple years ago, and this is Girls State. So it's a sequel of sorts, and it's following girls around. They kind of build, over the course of a week, they build like a mock American government. So people have to run for Supreme Court, president, Congress, and kind of like create their own like 3 branches of government and like try their hand at like creating policy and stuff like that. So it's like civics LARPing or something like that, if you will.
Sometimes I feel like we're actually doing that in our country, but okay.
Of all the 3 films, it's like very much like just classic civics.
We're never going to get the opportunity to talk to people from different parts of Missouri the way that we are right now.
Often when women start talking politics, we get shut down. But
am not one to be left on the dust.
We're excited. We're going to get some, for our talk back after that film, we're going to get some local young women that are, doing grassroots organizing or political activism and things like that, and, get their kind of POV on, what is Gen Z's approach, and, how are they getting, fired up, and, the future is female, so, let's shine a spotlight on the next generation that's coming up. We have different organizations that are going to be tabling at each of the Civic Cinema screenings, so another way for us to try to, build community through these film events. We'll also have voter registration opportunities and stuff like that during the series.
Dan Hudson, the executive director of Images Cinema in Williamstown. Their Civics on Screen series begins this evening with the film Bad Faith.
We'll talk with Dan again in the next couple of weeks about their Halloween horror series, Nightmare on Spring Street, and their animated movie series as well.
We'll trip into the words post-apocalyptic and the stories they tell with East Hampton author Jet Berry soon, but up next, the longest tail in the sky that we know of with Mr. Universe Salman Hameed.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
NEPM's podcasts are funded by Armbrook Village Senior Living in Westfield, offering assisted living and compass memory support with evidence-based treatment for those with memory loss. More at armbrookvillage.com.
Boldly go where no man has gone before.
Time for some more kitchen table astronomy with Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hameed, Mr. Universe. First off, we went to the first in the area Astronomy on Tap in East Hampton last week. It was a great time. It was really well attended. I did really good on the trivia.
Well, I think you had some help.
You corrected me in real time.
That is good.
I probably got 7 or 8 of the of the questions right on my own.
But yeah, and great food every third Tuesday of the month. Astro on Tap.
What were we talking about today? Black holes once again.
Yes, but this is one of those news stories which is really interesting for astronomers, and sometimes it's hard to translate. But let me just try to do that. So this paper came out in Nature, the journal Nature, last week. And of course, as you know, things that show up in Nature or Science are usually considered those stories that are not just important for astronomy, but important for the sciences in general. So there is a discovery of a really large jet from a galaxy. Now, a lot of what astronomers call active galaxies are those which have supermassive black holes. Almost all galaxies have supermassive black holes. Our own Milky Way has a supermassive black holes. But active galaxies are those where there is a lot of action going on with that particular black hole. And again, just as a reminder, yes, things go in the black hole, and once they are inside the event horizon, nothing can come out. But before they go in, you have an accretion disk usually, and the material is sped up close to the speed of light, and the friction that it produces, actually that material can really light up. It can have a lot of energy. In fact, it's the most energetic thing in the universe.
Besides toddlers.
Come over here.
Where do they find their energy?
That is right. And some of the material that is around the black hole, so this has not gone inside the event horizon, but it is right outside of it, spiraling in, it can get funneled into a jet. And these jets we have seen in other galaxies can then go tens of thousands of light years from the galaxy.
From the accretion disk around the black hole. Black holes are so dense that once anything goes inside them, we will not see them again. Even light cannot escape. But around the black hole, things are spinning close to the speed of light, creating all this energy, and sometimes so much energy builds up that it shoots out like a laser beam, but of light and energy.
That's right, and these are what is called collimated, meaning to say they stay narrow, which is a really amazing thing. You're talking about tens of thousands of light years, or hundreds of thousands of light years, and they stay very narrow, and that's because there are very high magnetic fields. So, and of course, you need material, a lot of material around the black hole to create all of these things. So that's what astronomers call an active galaxy. That's the foundations of it. We know these things happen. We have seen that. Oftentimes, these jets are seen not in visible light, but in radio waves. And we know, that these jets can actually be bigger than the size of the galaxy. So that's actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
Just as a side note, when I was doing my PhD, one of the galaxies we were looking at this ionized gas, meaning to say, that it's a hydrogen gas, but in a particular light with a filter. We were looking at this really boring galaxy, which was supposed that nothing is going on in the visible light. And I was in Chile, and we were just taking raw images with this filter that actually got this light in a slightly different narrow filter. And we saw way outside of this galaxy a giant filament beyond what we could see in stars. And we were struck by it. And then we did more observation, and it turns out this was that phenomena where a jet had gone in and hitting some material way out. So, what is going on right now about this Nature paper? Well, astronomers have discovered the largest jet ever. Not just that, it is probably the largest structure created by a physical object ever. So just to give you a scale, here is a galaxy which is about quite far, actually, 7 billion light years from us. And it has a jet, so it has a supermassive black hole in the middle, but it has a jet that is about 23 million light years across.
For the layperson, first of all, 7 billion years ago, the light from this galaxy left. It is only reaching us now.
So this is basically when the universe was about half its current age,
right?
If you think about it that way. So our Milky Way galaxy, here is another way of thinking about it. Our Milky Way galaxy is huge. We are on this tiny corner. You have seen those t-shirts that says, you are here, right?
Yeah.
So we are about 30,000 light years from the center of the galaxy. End to end, our entire galaxy, which has more than 100 billion stars, our sun is just one of them, end to end is about 100,000 light years or so. This particular jet, it is 23 million light years big. You can have 140 Milky Ways in the path of this jet.
Sorry, I was eating a Milky Way.
You could lay 140 Milky Ways right next to each other, and it would still be the length of this lasered flashlight jet shooting out from the accretion disk from this galaxy 7 billion light years away.
So the scale is staggering. This is the largest jet that astronomers have detected so far, and they have named it Porphyrion, the giant, within Greek mythology.
Because it's giant.
Right.
He's very, very short on charm.
It's two of my least favorite football teams, the Jets and the Giants.
That's right, and we're not going to talk about football, I guess. And it has been detected in radio waves. Here is why astronomers are excited about it. So I was saying, okay, fine, you found this big jet. What's the big deal? Well, in order to have this jet really collimated for 23 million light years, I mean, that's a very long distance. Usually you would expect something to come in and block it, change its direction. None of that has happened. And that is really surprising because oftentimes these jets run into something.
The jet flushed out again. Down he goes, and nothing but green shirts are there.
Like as I was mentioning about this filament that we found, because it was hitting some gas in between. Here you have this jet for 23 million light years long, and it just keeps on going. And they also think that, that in order to sustain this, you need a lot of magnetic fields. In order to sustain this length, remember, over 100 Milky Ways end to end. So this is far beyond the galaxy that is hosting it. You need to have these strong magnetic fields that are keeping it collimated for over 1 billion years. And if you want to do that, you need to have a constant stream of food feeding the supermassive black hole in order to keep this material constant throughout. So you can see why astronomers are excited about it, because this is a really interesting object, because this jet is doing things which we have never seen it do. And what astronomers call it, the scale of that is of the scale of a cosmic web. And cosmic web is a way of thinking about the large-scale structure of the universe. So when we think about the largest structures, we think about these galaxies are distributed in filaments. Like their locations are in filaments, and in between you have these empty voids. It's not empty, but the density is much lower. So astronomers try to figure out, how did that large-scale structure of the universe was formed? And in this particular case, you have a jet that is on the scale of these giant voids. And so it allows us potentially to figure out the properties of the universe being impacted by jets like this. One of the things that people are looking at, as I already mentioned, in order to keep this jet narrow, at a point like small, you need a lot of magnetic fields. And so there has been a puzzle. Why does our universe has a lot of magnetic fields? So if you look at the space between galaxies, which is called intergalactic medium, or inside galaxies, which is called interstellar medium between stars, it is magnetized. So there was this big question. Why is it magnetized? I mean, our sun, it has magnetic fields. Those are very crucial. And so it inherited it from the gas cloud that it was born from. Why was there magnetic field in the first place? So this is one of the ways astronomers are thinking that the material between galaxies and then inside galaxies may have been magnetized through the presence of these type of large jets.
So the jets themselves may be what's magnetizing everything?
They are creating this material. They are bringing this material out and spreading it out, right? So you are heating up gas and also bringing magnetic fields, magnetized material to the galaxies and the space between galaxies. So those are some of the reasons why this is actually a really big deal, but it's a little more tricky in terms of thinking about, this is 7 billion light years away, but, when the universe was half the age of the universe, who cares? It's not the first galaxy. No, but this is actually it's a really interesting discovery, and it can have really real implications in terms of the way we think our universe evolved.
Just the scale of how large this jet is, that's called, once again, what?
Porphyrion.
Porphyrion, like the giant.
Anybody want to feel it? Yeah!
If you took a flashlight and turned it on and followed the light, it would take 23 million years from when you turned that flashlight on to get to the end of where that light beam was shooting out to. 23 million years at the speed of light.
Right. And
not at your speed, not at the fastest your Tesla can drive.
And just as a scale, once more, Andromeda galaxy is about 2 million light years away, right? So here we are talking about 10 times the distance to Andromeda, and you have to sustain this. It's not just one time the particle went up. It has sustained this jet 23 million light years long for a long period of time, and astronomers think that it has been there at least for 2 billion years. And so you need to have possibly galaxy mergers and two galaxies merged, and the material from it has been feeding the black hole, or maybe a series of mergers. Now astronomers do have the capacity to potentially discover other jets like this as well, but right now this is the largest jet discovered. So really cool. And again, we are so small. We were talking about we are here in those Milky Way pictures. Here we are talking about scales of the large scale structure of the universe, not just Milky Way or the solar system.
I still keep going back to football. I can't believe the Jets beat the Patriots so bad last Thursday. You used to not be able to not beat the Jets.
But this is the reason why cosmic perspective is so important. Because you go like, you know what? So what if we lose? Think about it. Dinosaurs, they got extinct, and so will we. Football, really, not many people will remember the scores. Except for the Patriots dynasty, of course.
Oh yeah, that'll go on forever.
That will go.
Up next, East Hampton author Jedediah Barry and his new book, The Naming Song.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
NEPM's podcasts are funded by Armbrook Village Senior Living in Westfield, offering assisted living and compass memory support with evidence-based treatment for those with memory loss. More at armbrookvillage.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, offering co-op advantage checking with cash back on all purchases, plus secure debit card controls, all from the UMass 5 mobile banking app. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. We're joined by East Hampton author Jedediah Barry. Raised in the Hudson Valley region of New York State, his first novel, The Manual of Detection, won the Crawford Award and the Hammett Prize and was adapted for broadcast by BBC Radio.
His story in Cards of Family Arcana was published as a poker deck by Ninepin Press and was a finalist for a World Fantasy Award. His other works of short fiction appear online at Tor.com and Interfictions in journals and in anthologies including Conjunctions, Massachusetts Review, best American fantasy, year's best science fiction and fantasy, and many more.
And this Tuesday, which is to say tomorrow, sees the release of his new novel, The Naming Song, which takes an incredibly fantastical look at language, story, and family through a distinctive post-apocalyptic lens. There'll be an event with the author in conversation with Kelly Link, who we've had on the show as another fantastic author, at the Odyssey Bookshop in South Hadley tomorrow night, starting at 7 to celebrate. Jed Barry, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This is a wonderful book.
It was such a fun read.
Yeah. Kelly Link, who you'll be talking to at the Odyssey on the back, says, Jedediah Barry makes strange and wonderful magic out of the absence of words. This book is a parade of delights and nightmares.
We've got it all.
What's your summation? Let's bring the listener into. Khalees and I have the curse of knowledge. We've read the whole book. We love it. We don't want to spoil it, but entice the listener with what this book is about in your opinion.
Sure. Well, The Naming Song takes place in a far future after which language has gone away, which made it a very hard book to write because suddenly there were no words to use. But the main character, she works for an organization called the Committee of Names, or the Names Committee, and she is a courier. So she is delivering words to things that need names. And she gets kind of caught up in a conflict between the named and the nameless. There are people who want things left unnamed. There are those who want to accrue power through how they name things. And she's also looking for her long-lost sister in the course of this.
One of the more interesting things about the way this was written was the way that you did write around things. Mm-hmm. Like there is a character that I'm pretty sure is just a cat, but there's no word for cat. Right. So like the ways that you had to write around that particular character were fascinating and super, super cool. So talk about, writing about things that don't have names is clearly difficult, but what I found compelling about the story was those spaces in between, and those spaces in between end up being important plot points too.
Right. Yeah, while reading fantasy, I'm always often thinking about language and what the language the people are speaking in that book. We have to kind of understand it to some degree as a work of translation in many cases. And so I was thinking about this while writing it almost as though it was being translated into English while I was writing it. And there are these gaps. There are things for which the characters do not have words. And I made sure the narrator didn't use those words either, which was tricky. And yes, so the courier delivers the word stowaway to this animal, which it seems like there's enough information.
It was a cat.
This is a cat. And he is a very important character. He's there throughout the book. I think a cat almost ended up on the cover. And, the trick there is to kind of treat language like a magical thing. Like, what happens when something is nameless? How can we think about it fully when we don't have the words to describe it? And then what happens once it's kind of brought into view via language? And that's coursing through the whole of the book. And as you know, of course, there are some words missing through most of the book, and some that actually never even show up, which I don't know. I don't think there will be sequels, but you never know.
I want a sequel. It lends itself at the end to the possibility of a sequel, but it also lends itself to a prequel because, and this may be a tiny bit of a spoiler, we never find out why the words went away. Right. Whatever this thing is, the silence is a kind of a terrifying looming thing in the background that nobody talks about the whole time. We're speaking with author Jed Barry from East Hampton, whose new book, The Naming Song, officially comes out tomorrow. What I found really fascinating about it, just collaborating with all sorts of other works of literature, even the Bible. The Bible begins with, in the beginning was the Word.
Yes.
And God speaks the universe into existence. You speak your world into existence in this way that these people are rebuilding from this silence. So much so that I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, or if this is just a misperception, the first part of the book is harder to navigate because there are fewer words. But the more words that get worked into existence, the pace of the book picks up with it because you're really building a world with these words.
That's right. There is this long tradition, of course, of writers and fantasy writers working with language as a metaphor for magic, or vice versa. Ursula Le Guin, notably in the Earthsea books. and Tolkien even. I mean, in the Lord of the Rings, like speaking someone's name, can have repercussions. And so I wanted to explore that here. And yes, it's true. The pace of the book changes. The first part of it takes place over the course of about a year, and then after that, it's really just a couple of weeks of pretty furious action. It is an adventure story. That's the thing, and so while it is about language and it is about how we think about words, it's also it's kind of a spy story and very much an adventure story, and yeah.
You also write games, and I felt like there was very much a sort of like tabletop-y, LARP-y aspect to the way that this whole thing played out. Did your work on some of these games influence the action that you wanted to see on the page?
I feel like you have peered deep into my soul. So, as a kid, I mean, I grew up running and playing role-playing games, and that was really my start as a writer. I grew up in the little town of Catskill, New York, and we did not have access to these books. We knew something called Dungeons and Dragons existed. It was not available to us, so we just made it up. And I'm glad that worked out that way, because as a result, I was constantly making up worlds for my friends to play in. And the funny thing about going from that into fiction writing is that sometimes I'm looking for the other people around the table to tell me what the characters are doing, and I have to come up with it all myself. But it's true. I mean, fantasy role-playing games have been a big part of my life, and it's something I've returned to more recently in a direct sort of way, with actually writing some game material again, which has been a real pleasure.
We're speaking with the East Hampton author, Jed Berry, whose new book, The Naming Song, comes out tomorrow. There'll be an event at the Odyssey Bookshop in South Hadley that will be hosted by or emceed by or in conversation with Kelly Link, who another one of our fantastic local authors. Another thing that seems to be thematic for your interests is cards. You have an interactive card game called Arcana that happens to have a soundtrack by our friend Suitcase Junket, which we played at the intro and we'll hear on the outro as well.
Full disclosure, I gave to that Kickstarter. I do have it at home. It is wonderful.
And cards play a major role in the drawing of who you are as a person in this new book, The Naming Song. What is it about the appeal? And you just mentioned Dungeons and Dragons and these kind of cardy type games in some ways. Talk about the appeal of cards and why they're such a magical, mystical thing that appears in so much of your creative output.
I think there's, of course, this long history of using cards as divination practice, with tarot and the like. For me, I feel a personal connection to them going back, to childhood. Just playing card games with my grandfather was a very big deal when I was a kid. But it is something that keeps popping up in my fiction. And I think it has to do with this idea of being able to shuffle something, find a new way to look at something from a different perspective by changing the order of things. When I write, I'm sometimes writing on index cards. And the Family Arcana, which you mentioned, is a story that was published as a poker deck. And that literally has pieces of a story written on each card so that you shuffle it and read it in any order. I actually struggled for a long time with how to write this novel, how to write The Naming Song. And I paused in the writing of it and wrote the Family Arcana. And when I did that, it's like it broke it open for me. I suddenly knew how to write the beginning of this book. And so the first part of it has a lot of short sections. They're not playing card size, but they're short, small little pieces, little vignettes that could almost be shuffled and put into different order. And in fact, I did a lot of shuffling of them until I got them into the right order. And so, that turned out to be a really important tool into giving myself over to a little bit of chaos in order to find the right order.
There's also a lot of play with where and what borders are in this book, because it's not just language that are the borders. It's maps too. It's like interaction that ends up being the borders, like all of these unknown places that are wide open but unseeable simply because we don't have labels for them. Can we talk about the borders between like some of the groups in this book, frankly, because they're not as distant as I think the book initially makes out. everything, especially as we get towards its conclusion, ends up being this revelation of how intertwined everybody is and has been.
Yes.
I'm giving a lot away.
No, I think you're doing a good job of not giving too much away.
There are the named and the nameless territories in the book, and there is a map in the front of the book. And without giving too much away,
I feel like the map is a bait and switch, but that's okay.
No, I mean that's it exactly. That's it exactly. And it was so interesting going into the publication process with this when we got to the point where the publisher said, we should have a map in this book. And I thought, all right, I mean, there is a maps committee in the book. I don't really have an excuse not to include a map. But it meant setting things down in a way that changes over the course of the book. Mm-hmm. This is a book about kind of the creation of a world, and so the world is transforming. And I think you see that in a lot of fantasy literature. Of course, things are changing as the adventure goes about. But in here, I'm like really kind of messing with the fabric of the space, and so borders are changing, borders are shifting. I think that there's this inherently political aspect of fantasy literature which can't really be avoided. I think people like to think of fantasy as a way to escape, but it's not. You're always kind of coming back to what it means to be human and to be with each other in this world, and what does it mean when we put these boundaries down between one another. So this is a book kind of partly about breaking those boundaries, about making those boundaries more porous, and without giving too much away, that some of the main characters have to kind of move across some pretty big boundaries in order to find the things they're looking for.
We're speaking with author Jed Barry, whose new book, The Naming Song, comes out tomorrow. He's from East Hampton. He'll be at the Odyssey Bookshop in South Hadley in conversation with Kelly Link. There is a map at the beginning, as Khalees mentioned, which when I first saw it, I loved it. Anytime there's a map at the beginning of like a fiction book, I love it. Then I flipped and there was a little glossary, and I was like, uh-oh, I might be in trouble. But the words themselves often act as borders, too. You even have border words in this. And there is a magic, and I don't hope this isn't, revealing too much, but the idea of a spell, a magic spell, and spelling, those are words that are connected. Do you really believe in the power of words in the way that it manifests itself in this book? These words, they have dramatic, the naming of things has such a dramatic influence on the what happens to the characters in the book. Do you believe that words can have that kind of power in real life?
I think that we're so crowded with words that it's almost hard to see their effect in a day-to-day sort of way. In this book, I wanted to kind of strip it down and have each word, when it's introduced, have this big effect on how the world functions. But I do think language does affect us these ways. Now, obviously, we're not casting magic spells with our words, or at least most of us, most of the time. But I do think that that language is a powerful, kind of dangerous thing, and I think about it while writing. It's always kind of hanging over me, and I'm trying to find my way through that while also imagining a space that I can live in, that connects me to the world and hopefully connects us.
You're comfortable in this space because your mom worked in radio, but yes. I feel like that also connects back to like the importance of language too, because like we're in an audio medium, like all we have to communicate with everybody listening is our words and those connections there. So. Is radio important in that same way? Is that spoken word important to the way that you write?
It's true. My mom did work in radio. She was a disc jockey in a rock and roll station in upstate New York when I was a kid. And she would leave me with a babysitter, and then I would turn on the radio and hear her, and she would occasionally like dedicate a song to me, which was the most powerful thing imaginable, right? I mean, oh my God, my mom is the coolest person in the world, and she is dedicating a song to me live on air. So yeah, I mean, I think that medium is incredibly powerful. I have not been on radio much. She got me radio lessons as a kid, and I don't think I was terribly good at it at the time, but I'm glad for it now.
Well, if you believe in the power of radio, you're in luck because we're in the middle of a fun drive right now. But you should also believe in the power of words. And this book, The Naming Song by Jedediah Barry, is fantastic. It officially comes out tomorrow. You could go to your local bookshop at the Odyssey in South Hadley and pick it up.
Book Moon in East Hampton has signed copies.
And that's where Kelly Link is most of the time when she's not at that other bookshop. What a great read. What a testament to fiction, fantasy, and the power of words. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been delightful.
Tomorrow on the Fabulous 413, fun times in the fields.
We'll discover 3 farms collaborating on one parcel of land to bring a wealth of products to the valley. Nicole Blum and Ava Bloom, the car of Preservation Farm and Orchard in Hadley, about what each farm brings to the area and how working together on their acreage is good not just for the community, but the environment as well.
Plus, we'll run away to join the magic of the Big Top at Mike's Maze in Sunderland, where this year's designer Jess Marsh-Wishman and farmer Dave Wisman are bringing folks into their circus-themed maze. We'll try out some of the carnival entertainment and trivia. I'm Monty Belmonte.
I'm Khalees Smith. We'll see you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.